you're going to ask yourself, why weren't we taught how to do these things? And why were we not taught how to leverage our dollars? This is why people are building wealth and they aren't paying taxes on it.
This 25-year-old gentleman, his goal was to retire early. And again, following the traditional approach, which we all have been conditioned to do, Abel has done nothing wrong here. He got a great paying job and he sat in that cafeteria just like everyone else and watched that same movie about how it's now time to invest in yourself and contribute to your 401k. Abel has done nothing wrong. But what he learned is if he continues down this path, it will take him 37 years before he hits his freedom number. And again, I get it. He'll make more money over time. Things will continue to grow, and I will address that, I promise. But looking at it just from an apples to apples perspective, if he just continued to put away the same dollar amount year after year after year, it would take far more than it needs to be. And the words retire early are not even an option. And then obviously the other part is he wants to do all of the things that we all want to do. Buy a home, travel, do all of the other basic things that we all want to do as it relates to having enough cash flow or income available to us to be able to do so. And my objective is to make sure we don't limit him in being able to do any of those things while also building a vehicle that will generate income for him. So what's his responsibility in this? What's your response? If this is you, what's your responsibility in this process? Your responsibility in this process is commitment, because this is not Bitcoin. This is not something that will be achieved by tomorrow. It takes time. It takes commitment, and it takes focus. And so that is his response. That's what he's responsible for. So let's kind of jump into what this would look like. So he makes $50,000 a year. I'm using the exact same, I'll call it 90-10 rule that he's using. So I didn't change that, because clearly 45,000 is what he's currently living off and is what he's comfortable spending. So I didn't want to adjust or change. He doesn't have to now switch to ramen or whatever it was he used to do. He has to switch. We're going to keep the same structure. 90-10. 90% of $50,000 is 45 grand. He's going to take those 45 grand, take that 45 grand, pay his expenses, and he'll still have cash flow. Whatever his normal process is, it has not changed. We're going to take that 5,000 though, and instead of dumping it into, I'll call it an investment account, like an IRA, 401k, 403b, TSP, government 457 plan, we're going to take that $5,000 and put it in a secure compound interest account. And let's just take a look at what a 25-year-old putting away $417 a month over the next 10 years would accomplish. So we're going to look at from year 1 to year 10 inside of a secure compound interest account. And again, everything else is the same. All he did was take that $5,000 and put it away. Again, the first step, keeping the same structure. We're going to take the 10%. $5,000 a year. 5,000 divided by 12 is about 416 and some change. So we're going to take that 417, get it into a secure compound interest account. So when we do that we're going to do it for the next 10 years. Why did I choose 10 years? We'll get into that, because the objective is to build up enough cash value in this vehicle so that he can then leverage that cash value to pay bills. So in year 1, he's paying bills like he normally does using the 45,000. Year 2, paying bills like he normally does using the 45,000. All the way to year 10, nothing is changing in his process. All we're doing is taking that $5,000 that he was already committing to his company's 401k, and we're taking that $5,000 and putting it into a different vehicle. So when we do that, after 10 years, what has happened? And again, just 10 years is not a very long time. He has about $7,600 in income available. That means or does nothing for him. But when you look at the rest of his account, he's put in about $50,000. He's leveraged about $110,000. He's making on average 7% on his dollar amount that he's put in. He's making on average 3% of this leverage dollar amount. The growth on this dollar amount and the growth on this dollar amount is giving him cash value of $73,308. So at this moment, can I make this a little bit bigger? I can. So at this moment, he has $73,308 at the end of year 10. Can we agree that $73,308 is more than 45 grand? And if any of you have ever had a cash value life insurance policy, whole life, variable life, universal life, doesn't matter. If you have cash value in your cash value life insurance policy, you are able to leverage it regardless. Well, I won't say regardless of the dollar amount. You are able to leverage it up to a certain extent, meaning you can't take everything in it because the life insurance company won't allow you to. But there's a certain portion of that cash value that you are able to leverage and you can use to do whatever you want. Now, there is a cost to leveraging this money. There is a cost to, and when I say leverage, I'm just strictly saying borrow. It's not scientific. When you're leveraging cash value inside of a cash value life insurance policy, you are borrowing some portion of this cash value and you're able to use it for whatever you want. And when you borrow this cash value, there are no tax implications on this dollar amount. So again, reset the stage. It's year 10. He's been putting away $50,000 or $45,000. I'm sorry. He's been putting away $5,000 a year inside of a secure compound interest account. He's been using his remaining income, 45 grand, to pay bills and live off. And yeah, he's probably got a few promotions. He's probably gotten some cost of living increases. Again, just keeping apples to apples. He's been paying bills with the 45 grand, put away $5,000 a year. In 10 years, he has 73,000 in cash value. Now we want to look at year 10. We are now sitting at year 10. He's still making the same 50,000. 5,000 of that. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. 5,000 of that is still going into his secure compound interest account. Here's that 73,000 in cash value. What can he do with that 73,000 in cash value? He can absolutely take 45,000, leverage 45,000 from this 73,000 and pay bills. And when he leverages this 45,000 and pays these expenses, he has zero expenses for that year. And again, I'm using it as though we're talking light, gas, car note, rent, and anything that he's using for entertainment. I'm just saying the whole 45,000. Leveraging the whole 45 from this cash value and paying all his expenses. But if you remember, he made 50,000 that year. He took 5 of it and dumped it into his secure compound interest account. But let's look at the performance, or let's measure what the costs were. Because remember, there is a cost to doing this exercise. And what is that cost? So if you remember, he's got $50,000 that he makes. That $50,000 that's sitting in the secure compound interest account, that $50,000 that's sitting in his cash value is making money for him. On average, it's around 7%. So $50,000 times 7% is about $3,500. Well, the $45,000 that he leveraged, the $45,000 that he borrowed, there's a cost to that. That cost is 4%. So if we were to multiply 4%, as in the cost to borrow that 4% times $45,000, we would get $1,800. So if he made $3,500 and it cost $1,800 to leverage the $45,000 to use to go pay all of his expenses, the net interest earned inside of his policy $1,700, meaning in that year, his policy didn't get smaller. He didn't lose cash value. There was a net cash value increase of $1,700 in his policy. Now, all expenses have been paid. Now that all expenses have been paid, what do we do with this remaining $45,000? Well, I go back to that wealth equation. Pay yourself first. The idea is to take all of your income and pay yourself first. So the idea is take all $45,000 that's left over because you don't need it. All your expenses are paid. You said you only needed 45,000. So you got 45,000 in liquid cash sitting in your hand, ready to go to work, ready to go recruit more employees. So the ideal situation would be to take this 45,000 and dump it into this policy. That would be the ideal situation. To not cause confusion, I'm going to do something that most of my infinite bankers do. Instead of, because in a secure compound interest account, you're able to actually keep the same policy, but increase the contribution amounts inside that policy and just requalify. But instead of doing that, I'm going to open a brand new secure compound interest account just so that we can keep these things separate so you can see them. So again, at year 10, we've taken 5,000, dumped it into our normal vehicle. We've paid all of our bills from the leveraged dollar amount, which means our bills made us money. The bills we paid, the 45,000 we paid, made us, what is that, 3%? And then that remaining 45,000, we're going to put it to work. And notice there's a split here. I'm saying that 45,000 is being split between a new MPI plan, a new premium finance strategy of 35,000, and then I've got 10,000 left over. I'm saying I cannot get all 45,000 into this next policy. Why is that? Why can't I get all 45,000 in? Well, again, as I've mentioned before, structure matters. Who creates these matter. Just because you have $45,000 available does not mean you can use all 45,000 to start another policy. There are rules to this. So let's talk about some of those rules. So at age 35, which is where Abel is, Abel, not John. At age 35, where Abel is, he's got this 50,000 in income. The ideal situation would be to put all 50,000 into a new secure compound interest producing vehicle. Well, 5,000 of it is already accounted for. 5,000 is going into the old policy, or the first policy rather. Well, the remaining, the 45,000, I would love to get all of it in as new premium for the new policy, but I can't. Why is that? There is this thing called the max contribution, and there's this thing called max insurability. And again, the person building this should know this. Who you get products like this from matters because it's all about the structure. So if we look at this 35-year-old's maximum contribution that he can put into a secure compound interest account, here's what we know. That maximum is somewhere around 40% of his income plus 50% of his savings. So without accounting for any more dollars, I'm going to assume that he's been diligent enough over these last 10 years and he hasn't been saving anything extra. He's been putting his 5,000 into the secure compound interest account, and that 45 has just been spent on whatever it's being spent on. So I'm going to say he has zero savings. So therefore, when he has this extra 45,000, he wants to put this extra 45,000. Remember, 5,000 of this went to the original policy. So he's got 45,000 that he wants to put to work. If his max contribution is 40% of his income and his income is $50,000, then that would mean 40% of $50,000. So 50K times 40% is equal to 20,000. So from a contribution perspective, he can contribute 20K into a new policy, but it's 40% of your income plus 50% of your savings. I'm going to assume there's zero savings. Well, if I've got 45,000 available and I use 20,000 of that, if I've got 50,000 available and I'm using 20,000 of that to dump into a policy like this, the remaining 30,000 can be considered savings, right? Even though I'm using 5 of it into my other policy, I've got 30,000 technically of savings. So the max that I can put into a product like this is 50% of what I have saved. So again, just to recap, if I take $20,000 and I'm using that to contribute, I have 30,000 left over. And if that 30,000 is what I have liquid available to me, I'm going to call that savings. So the max that I can put into a vehicle like this would be 50% of my savings, 50%. So the remaining $30,000 times 50%, 15K. So what I'm saying is I can contribute into a new vehicle. I can contribute into a new secure compound interest account a total of 35,000. Now, if you divide 35,000 by 12, that ends up being about 2,900, 2,917. I want to take a look at what 29,000 or 35,000 inside of a secure compound interest account would look like starting at age 35. So I'm going to jump ahead. So again, let me make this bigger so you can see it. So 35 years of age, he's now 35 years of age, right? 35 years of age, and he's now putting away 2917. So the next stage, we handled the first 10 years, first 25 to 35, we've been borrowing money from our policy. Well, now we've hit this 35-year mark. This 35-year mark, we're going to do something different. At this 35-year mark, we're going to now open a second policy, and we're going to use that $35,000 as contributions for this second policy, and I'm going to grow it for the next 10 years. So 35 to 45, if you would multiply this by 12, this is $35,000 or somewhere around that. So the bottom line is these are the contributions. So I'm not going to get into the details yet. I just wanted to kind of highlight what that would look like. Let's break down what year 20 would actually look like. And then I'll show you on the vibe board what year 20 would actually look like. So from year 10 to year 20, he would have accumulated $280,000 inside of his original policy. How is that? Because of the $50,000, he's taking $5,000 every year and dumping it into this policy. So from years 10, 11, 12, all the way to year 20, that $5,000 has been growing. Or I'm sorry, this $5,000 has been contributed to the original policy. Well, what else was happening during that 10-year period? From year 10 to year 20, what else was happening? Well, he was still borrowing. I'm sorry. This is at year 20. So at year 20, so year 10 to year 20. So from year 10 to year 20, he's been borrowing inside of his policy. And he would have borrowed $45,000 every year for 10 years. So 45,000 times 10 is about 450,000. And I already showed you, if I'm borrowing 45,000 and I'm making 7% on the money that I've contributed, and the cost of me borrowing the 45,000 is a 4% cost, that net difference is right around, was it 13? What did I say? 13, I think it's $1,300 a month. And so if we were to take that $1,300 and also spread that over that 10-year period, and I am making some assumptions here. I will dig into those assumptions, I promise. But that borrowed 450 gave me a net interest increase of about $170,000. So from year 10 to year 20, I accumulated a cash value of about $280,000. When I show you in the calculator, there's income available of about $31,000, all off the $5,000 that I was putting away from year 1 to year 20. But then also I had a second policy. I had a second policy that started at year 10. That second policy, what I'm contributing into that second policy, which is what I just showed you, $35,000 a year into the second policy. So as I contribute $35,000 a year into that second policy, can we agree that if I put $35,000 in year 1, there's a portion of that $35,000 that's available to me in cash value that I can leverage? Put in another $35,000 in year 2, there's more leverage that I can use. Put in another $35,000 in year 3, the relock feature kicks in. That means there's even more leverage. So over that 10-year period, year 10 to year 20, I have leverage from policy 2 that I could be taking. But notice, I'm not. I'm just letting policy 2 continue to grow. And in 10 years, I would have accumulated $500,000 in cash value. And when I show you in the calculator, that equates to about $52,000 in income. And then that $10,000 that I have left over, I really didn't know what to do with it. That's extra $10,000 that he has available to him. And if you remember, why is that? $5,000 went into the original policy. The max contribution that I could put into the second policy is $35,000. So there's still $10,000 left over that he gets to travel, put it in a high yield savings account, open up policies for his kids. Like there's many different things that we can do. Didn't even go into that. I just wanted to highlight year 20. And let's take a look at year 20. So remember, he's 25 years of age at the start. This is the first 10 years. The first 10 years, he created cash flow or cash value of about 73,000. And we took that 73,000 in cash value and we've leveraged it in year 10. We leveraged it in year 11. Year 11. So from 25 to 35, what would this look like at 36? Because at year 10, he took 45,000. At 36, would he have more available to him that he would be able to leverage? If he leveraged 45,000 in year 1, would he have another 45,000 available is the question. You might argue that if he took a $45,000 loan in year 10, if he took a $45,000 loan at year 10, at year 11, he may not have enough. Might be your argument. But if you remember, we started a second policy. That second policy was from 35, starting at 35 till, and again, I run it out 10 years, but let's go to age 36 in the second policy. In age 36, in the second policy, putting away $35,000, how much cash value is there? So in addition to the, 88,000 that was sitting in policy 1, he has additional cash value of another 33. So if he has 88,000 in one policy, 33,000 in another policy, would it be possible at year 11 to leverage 45,000 to pay his bills? I think the answer is yes. And this continues year after year till year 20. So let me go back to the original policy and just jump right to year 20. So age 25, year 20 would be age 45. Been putting away the same $417 a month every year for the last 20 years. He would have available, without even looking at cash value, by the way, he would have available at year 20, 31,000 in tax-free dollars that he can leverage in this policy. It's not 45, but it's close. And in addition, he has cash value, which I showed over here on this last over on the Vibe board. He has 280,000 in cash value available. So again, the maths. Now let's look at year 20. It's year 20 in total, but inside this second policy, it's actually only year 10, right? So he started this second policy at age 35. So now let's look at this at age 45. That's $35,000 a year for 10 years. Notice, without even looking at the cash value. At year 20, he would have 52,000 tax-free income available to be able to leverage out of this policy as income. 30,000 in one policy, 52,000 in another. That's 83 grand. I think it's 31 and 52. 83 grand. That's available in just income for both policies at year 20. So year 10, he was between year 1 and year 10, he was leveraging, between year 1 and year 10, he was building cash value. From year 10 to year 20. So year 1 to year 10, he was building cash value. Year 10 to year 20, in one policy, he's building cash value. And in another policy, he's building cash value. And he's able to leverage both of them during that 10-year span. And the amount of cash value, as I mentioned, was $500,000. So at year 20, does he need to still borrow cash value to be able to pay his bills? Now, I've said a lot, but let me say it again. From years 1 to 10, he was building cash value. At year 10, he had 73,000 in his first policy. He's now borrowing 45,000 out of that policy, and he has 45,000 that he's leveraging in that policy. And because he's leveraging that 45,000, he has now accumulated a total of about 450,000 of borrowed money in the first policy. And we can say it's 450,000 between these two policies if you like. You can say it however you want, but the bottom line is if he's borrowing $45,000 every year for 10 years, he has an accumulated borrowed dollar amount of 450,000. Who's paying that? It's still owed. It's just hanging out there. But my point is this, without addressing the 450, without even paying any attention to the 450,000 that's been leveraged, my question is this. Now, starting at year 20, does he still need to continue borrowing money from his policy? Or does he have enough does he have enough income being generated by both policies to now supplement his income, to now supplement and pay for his expenses? Well, let's see. If you've got 31,000 in one policy and 52,000 in another policy, that's 83 grand. So by year 20, he no longer needs to borrow from his cash value. So this 450 is just sitting there and it's still collecting interest, by the way. But now he's in a position to now take income from his policies both at year 20. And when he starts taking income from these policies, that's a total of 80 grand, almost double what he needs. But now let's move over to year 30. Another 10 years go by. Another 10 years go by. And where is this 50,000 coming from? This is still his normal income. He's still making money. And so he's still dumping money into this policy, 5 into the original, 35 into the other, and there's still 10 grand hanging out. And cash value is still continuing to grow, but we're actually using leverage money to pay our expenses. So his income is no longer paying expenses. His income is solely going towards these policies. Well, by the year 30 mark, he would have accumulated cash value of about 800,000. He would have income available to him of about 81,000. And in policy number 2, 35 grand for 20 years, he would have accumulated cash value of $1.9 million. He would have access to income of 215. Now I can show you in the calculator if you don't believe me. But the point is he worried about $45,000 anymore? All because he adjusted how he was focusing on where the money was going. For the first 10 years, yeah, it was 45,000 going to expenses, 5 going into a secure compound interest account. But there was this point where he had enough cash value that he could shift. And he could shift and start using his leveraged dollars to pay his expenses. And when he did that, he could truly become self-directed. He could truly take control of where his money was going, and he could truly pay himself first, meaning put all of his income to work and use the leveraged dollars to pay his expenses. There are some things that I left out. What about if his income and expenses change throughout that 10, 20, 30-year period? I can address it, not a problem. We haven't addressed inflation yet. So let's do that. And then what about market fluctuations? What happens if the market crashes? Because Donnell, I know if the market crashes, someone's going to owe the life insurance company 4%. Let's talk about it. And that 450,000, that was never paid, that 450,000 is still continuing to grow. We can address that too. But let's pause here.